Right, history is literally happening right in front of our eyes. We have the liberal destroy Trump. Mainstream media is now in a free fall and on the brink of complete and total collapse. That's not an overstatement. It's not hyperbole. Now, these propagandists and champions of fake news continue to be exposed day after day, and CNN is leading the way. Now, I'm going to share my advice for the head of CNN, their chief of fake news and propaganda news, Jeff Zucker, in just a minute. Jeff, I'm trying to save your career. But first, let me explain how one of the biggest anti-Trump networks has lost all their credibility and can no longer be trusted by you, the American people. Now, at this point, we should put CNN 6 feet, you see right there, underground for repeatedly spreading lies, propaganda, black helicopter, tinfoil hat conspiracy theories, and for viciously trying to take down this president. Now, let's just look at some of the network's many controversies and scandals they've had. Now, there's the image of CNN's former New Year's Eve co-host. Really, it's so graphic. Every time we show you, we have to put a warning on the screen. Kathy Griffin, posing like an ISIS fighter. Look at how despicable that is, with a bloody, severed head of a Trump lookalike. Pretty disgusting. And after that vile photo shoot, CNN then fired Griffin. Fair enough. And then earlier this month, CNN cut ties. Remember Reza Aslan? That's the unhinged liberal responsible for disturbing tweets like this one, quote, "This POS," you know what it is not just an embarrassment to America and a stain on the presidency, he's an embarrassment to humankind. Oh, that's fair and balanced. Now, kicking unhinged liberal hosts to the curb is just the beginning of CNN's massive credibility crisis. CNN has been routinely humiliated for pushing their fake news. Remember, earlier this week, 3 so-called journalists allegedly resigned, I don't believe that, after the outlet had to retract a completely made-up story about a Trump ally, a friend of mine, Anthony Scaramucci, which claimed that Anthony was being investigated for colluding with the Russians through dealings with a Russian investment fund. You know, CNN and the rest of the Destroy Trump media, they have tried to play it off, oh, it's just an honest mistake, and say that CNN did the right thing. They retracted the story. But according to an explosive report in the New York Post, it appears that CNN may have been forced to correct the fake news hit piece. Take a look at this headline. CNN faced a $100 million lawsuit over botched Russia story. Now, according to the Post, CNN quickly retracted the story. Why? Anthony Scaramucci threatened a massive libel lawsuit. Now, of course, that example is not the only time CNN has gotten a story completely wrong. Let's go back. Let's stay right here in the month of June. June 16th, the network had to delete a tweet and issue a correction for saying, oh, only Democrats were praying before the congressional baseball game. Remember after Steve Scalise was shot in the assassination attempt? And the day before that, well, CNN's senior unhinged White House correspondent, Jim Acosta, he tweeted, then deleted, his ridiculous claim that President Trump didn't visit Congressman Steve Scalise in the hospital. Not true. And also earlier this month, the head of the former FBI director, James Comey, in his testimony before the Senate Intelligence Committee, CNN had to alter a report that said that Comey would contradict President Trump's statements about not being under investigation by the FBI. Wrong. The embarrassment for CNN doesn't even end there. Now, take a look at the time CNN covered the president's so-called eating habits. These are really, really hard-hitting investigative reports that really matter to all the Americans in poverty, on food stamps, and out of the labor force, and those that can't buy a house. This matters to them. Take a look.
Apparently, the president gets 2 scoops. You know, everyone else around the table gets 1, and no word if there were sprinkles.
At the dessert course, he gets 2 scoops of vanilla ice cream with his chocolate cream pie instead of the single scoop for everyone else.
Really? That's news at CNN? And there's this ridiculous comment from the network's top news anchor. Watch this.
He's the president of the United States. If
Right.
he wants to say that, Barack Obama wants to say whatever. If George Bush says, I looked in his eyes and thought he was...
If he took a dump on his desk, you would defend it.
Say it.
Wow, such hard-hitting news, which brings us to CNN's political commentator, yes, the one and only Van Jones. Remember, former Obama administration official, constantly smearing and slandering the president. Now, tonight it appears Van Jones may have some explaining to do. Why? James O'Keefe, Project Veritas, has now released a new undercover video. It features Van Jones. In the tape, he appears to admit that there's nothing to back up the left's Russia collusion narrative that has been going on 11 months. Now, Fox hasn't independently verified the contents, but you can see it for yourself. Take a look.
Hey, man.
The Russian thing is just a big nothing burger.
Really?
And just yesterday, James O'Keefe, Project Veritas, released yet another undercover tape, which apparently shows a CNN producer finally just admitting the truth that the network has a massive anti-Trump agenda. Okay, yeah, we haven't been able to verify, but we have. Take a look. Watch.
You win because you know the game and you play it right. She didn't play it right.
Then why is CNN constantly like Russia this, Russia that?
Because it's ratings.
Because it's ratings?
Our ratings are incredible right now. My boss, a couple days yesterday, we were having a discussion about this dental shoot, and he's like, I just want you to know what we're up against here. And he goes, just to give you some context, President Trump pulled out of the climate accords, and for a day and a half we covered the climate accords, and the CEO of CNN said in our internal meeting, he said, good job everybody covering the climate accords, but we're done with it, let's get back to Russia.
But honestly, you'd think the whole Russia is just like...
Could be. I mean, it's mostly right now. Like, we don't have any big giant proof. But then they say, well, there's still an investigation going on. And you're like, yeah. I don't know. If you were finding something, we'd know about it. The way these leaks happen, they'd leak it. They'd leak. If it was something really good, it would leak.
Whoopsie daisy. Looks like Jones, it looks like CNN President Jeff Zucker have real serious explaining to do. Now, CNN did put out a statement yesterday. They're standing by their producer, which I'm glad. This guy's not going to get fired. They didn't mention anything about Zucker's let's get back to Russia comments. Let's be clear tonight. Zucker is leading all the fake news circus at CNN. And as we said last night, all the blame for what is happening at CNN should be on his shoulders. Now, he's positioned his network to be one of the mainstream media leaders in trying to take down the president, this anti-Trump hate. He needs to be held accountable. And tonight, I'm going to do Jeff Zucker a favor. Hey, Jeff, you want to restore any sense of credibility at your network, you need to stop trying to destroy the presidency of Donald Trump and be on a jihad agenda to attack. And if you're willing to lie and collude to do that, really? Where are your ethics? Instead, here's my advice, Jeff. Start focusing on the 6 massive scandals that should really be investigated but are not being reported by your network. James Comey admitting under oath that he had his friend leak a memo to the New York Times, hoping it would lead to a special counsel. By the way, Jeff, look into the Records Act. That might have been violated. That's a felony. And by the way, also there's former Obama Attorney General Loretta Lynch, possibly obstructing justice. How? Interfering in the Clinton email investigation. Now, senators are starting to look into that. Jeff, I suggest that you and your network may want to do some investigative work here. Now, Comey testified that Lynch told him to call the Clinton email investigation, not an investigation, a matter. And he listened. And don't forget the 40-minute tarmac meeting with Bill Clinton just days before Comey let Hillary Clinton off the hook. And then, of course, next is Hillary Clinton's many, many scandals. Jeff, there's a lot of smoke and fire here. And there's now evidence to suggest that the original server investigation was, in fact, compromised. Plus, there's also the Clinton-Russia collusion story. That's the Uranium One deal. We had 20% of America's uranium, the foundational material for nuclear weapons. She signs off a waiver. It goes to Vladimir Putin and Russia. And meanwhile, people involved in the deal are kicking back millions to the Clinton Foundation. Jeff, that's called pay to play. And by the way, destroying or mishandling classified information, those are both felonies. And by the way, President Obama also has a serious Russia problem. Jeff, you might want to investigate this. Remember, after he learned in August of 2016, Russia was trying to meddle in our presidential election. Why didn't he do anything? Also, look at Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. No matter how you feel about the guy, the only law we know that has been broken in this Russia collusion story is that they surveilled, unmasked, and then leaked intelligence on General Flynn. That's a violation of the Espionage Act. And finally, there's a special counsel. His name is Robert Mueller. Look at the glaring, potentially illegal conflicts of interest here. Mueller's BFF is James Comey. Members of the team that Mueller is hiring have donated to Obama and Clinton. That's called a conflict of interest. And one of the attorneys he's hired actually represented the Clinton Foundation. So, Jeff, these are 6 stories you at CNN and, frankly, all of you in the left-wing Destroy Trump media should actually be covering. Instead of the black helicopter theories, tinfoil hat conspiracy theories, you know what? Maybe it's time to step up, and instead of publishing fake, misleading, flat-out false news, maybe it's time to tell the American people the truth. Do some real reporting. Now, former Governor Palin, she's now suing the New York Times for an op-ed that was published after the shooting of Congressman Scalise. The Times editorial board incorrectly linked Palin's rhetoric to the shooting of Congresswoman Gabby Giffords. Now, the New York Times did later issue a correction, and also today we learned that Vice News had to retract 2 stories about President Trump. This never ends.
Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. It is a week that will live in infamy in the history of CNN. And if anything, it is getting worse by the day. We have not yet installed a countdown clock to the next ethics scandal. We're considering it, though. In the meantime, here is the latest. Earlier today, Project Veritas released yet another undercover video discrediting that channel. Now, Fox hasn't yet confirmed the authenticity of the video, but it appears to show CNN contributor Van Jones admitting that the story his network has obsessed over from breakfast till bedtime for the past 7 months at least is basically a sham.
Hey, man.
The Russian thing is just a big nothing burger.
Really?
Then why CNN constantly, like, Russia this, Russia that?
Because it's ratings.
Now, before we continue, one obvious point. The tape you just saw is a little creepy. Privacy is vital to the functioning of any society, not to mention to human happiness itself. And unfortunately, it appears to be disappearing in this country thanks to the digital revolution. Even cable news figures ought to be allowed to have conversations on the street without worrying that their private remarks are being secretly recorded, as they now so often are. Also, by all accounts, for whatever it's worth, Van Jones apparently is a nice guy. Everyone who knows him says so. That said, how wonderfully revealing this exchange is. The Russia story is a nothing burger? Yep, we knew that. If only they admitted as much on CNN. But in private, they know it too. You remember the tape released just yesterday in which a CNN producer conceded that his boss, Jeff Zucker, demanded that CNN shows drop actual news coverage in order to spend much more time on the Russia conspiracy, since that storyline makes more money for the network? It is as corrupt as you imagined it was. Meanwhile, according to the New York Post, CNN apparently had to retract last week's bogus Russia story and fire the 3 reporters who wrote it after being threatened with a $100 million libel suit from Anthony Scaramucci. He's the Trump associate who was slandered by the piece. Whoa! What is next for CNN? Well, on his show, Rush Limbaugh predicted the end may be near.
Could Donald Trump be the end of CNN? What a legacy that would be. I think that's what the Trump administration is doing with many in the media. They're like cats. He's got this little red laser light and is just causing them to make fools of themselves, and everybody's laughing at them as they're crashing into walls and sofa and the floor. And that's what little Jim Acosta had happen to him yesterday.
Cats to a red laser light. Awesome. Well, we don't know what's going to happen next at CNN, but whatever happens, this is clearly a network in crisis. And that happens to companies from time to time. Enron, Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers. It's not unheard of. The question is, how does your company respond when its corruption is revealed? Well, here's how CNN is responding. Its media critic, Brian Stelter, who also hosts a show on the channel, let loose on Twitter today, attacking the forces of what he described as anti-journalism. Quote, activists promoting hatred and resentment of the press. Millions of people are exposed to extreme anti-journalism views daily, spreading hate about an entire class of American workers. Got that? American workers. In Stelter's telling, those would be journalists, these soft-handed Princeton grads who would be consultants at McKinsey right now if they hadn't worked on the school paper. They're workers. In fact, they're the opposite of workers. They're members of the privileged class, and their fear and outrage at the stirrings of populism is proof that they know they are. When the public speaks, they shudder because they know exactly how much they have to lose. Viewers no longer trust these people for a very simple reason. They're not trustworthy. And it's strange they don't know that. Let's say you own a potato chip factory, okay? And you once had an unbreakable monopoly on snack food. If people wanted potato chips, they had to buy them from you. Then one day, a new company comes along and starts making better potato chips at the same price. What would happen? Of course, you